Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Alicia from Kolsquare, and today we're going to be diving into the state of influencer marketing in the UK. So, where the market is heading, what's driving change, and how brands can stay competitive as we move into 2026. And I'll just show you the agenda here. We will jump into some characteristics of the UK in the influencer market before jumping into our discussion with a very special guest. You can see her already here, Laura from Bloxham PR. And then for those of you who don't know us yet, Kolsquare is a European influencer marketing platform that helps brands and agencies identify, manage, and measure their creator partnerships. We're trusted by brands like Coca-Cola, Netflix, Refi, and we're really proud to be a certified B Corp, committed to making influence more transparent and responsible. And this session is built on insights from our latest UK and European market study, where we analyzed thousands of data points across brands and agencies to understand the trends shaping the influencer marketing right now. And we will start with what makes the UK market so exciting and so different? The UK was labeled in our study as the confident accelerator. So let's find out why this is the case. So firstly, scaling fast and with conviction. So the UK is currently Europe's most bullish market when it comes to influencer marketing. What we're seeing is a real sense of confidence and acceleration here. 27% of brands say that they plan to increase the number of KOLs they work with by more than 50% next year. And that's well above the European average of 17%. So in total, 84% of brands and agencies in the UK are planning to collaborate with more creators, and 81% expect their influencer marketing budgets to grow in 2026. So, kind of despite wider economic uncertainty here, the UK remains a growth market. Brands are really seeing ROI from their creators, and they're scaling their investments with conviction and not caution. The second characteristic is polarized spending habits. This is an interesting one as it's so dynamic. It's just how polarizing this is and how influencer marketing spend has become for the UK. On one end, 28% of brands are still spending under 75K a year on influencer marketing. Often smaller, agile, and fast-growing players testing and learning their way forward. On the other, 14% of brands are spending over 1 million annually, which actually ties the UK with Germany at the top end. This duality makes the UK market so dynamic compared to other countries. So you've got a challenger D2C brands using creators to drive community and conversion, and at the same time, large, well-funded brands using kind of data-driven, always-on creator strategies at scale. So with the UK, it's not one uniform market. It's more of an ecosystem that blends experimentation with maturity. The third characteristic is strong tech adoption with room to grow. So when it comes to technology, the UK is amongst the most advanced markets in Europe. About 1 in 3 brands are now using a tech platform to manage their influencer campaigns, slightly above the European average. And what's interesting here is that adoption is particularly high among mid to large size companies. They're investing in technology to improve efficiency, data accuracy, and also campaign measurement. But there's still room to grow here. A lot of smaller brands are still managing influencer activity manually. So the spreadsheets, the DMs, the kind of gut instinct is still there, which makes scalability harder. And as the market matures, we expect tech adoption to rise, especially as ROI and compliance pressures increase as well. And lastly, Micro influencer momentum. So we'll talk about this is kind of the real engine to the UK creator economy at the moment. It's micro influencers. An incredible 93% of UK brands and agencies work with them, compared to the 86% across Europe. So that tells us a few things. Firstly, the UK is prioritizing authenticity and community over just pure reach. Brands are realizing that influence doesn't come from the biggest names, but from creators who drive genuine engagement with niche audiences. It also shows a maturing mindset. So working with micro influencers requires more coordination, but the payoff is trust and conversion is much higher. And this focus on relevance and long-term partnerships is what will define the next phase of growth in the UK, which is very exciting to see. So those are the key takeaways here from the market study, which has launched today. I'll share the link and the QR code at the end of this webinar for you to download immediately. But now that we've explored that, let's dig into how brands are actually operating day to day, where budgets are going, what formats are winning, and what the next wave of opportunities look like in the UK. So today I'm joined with Laura. And Laura, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm digital account manager at Bloxham PR. So I work for this 360 agency, very much heading up kind of VIP and influencer relationships for my clients. They vary from fashion to travel. And then previous to that, I worked in-house for Motel Rocks and Superdry. So that's where my career started, was at Superdry head office.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us once again, Laura. I have a few questions to kind of pick your brain here, starting with this first one. So from the market study, we learned that 60% of brands and nearly 80% of marketers are now working with fewer than 100 KOLs a year. And that kind of suggests the industry is prioritizing depth over the scale. So are you seeing that play out in your day to day, and how are brands managing the balance between kind of being selective and then still driving enough reach?
Yeah, of course. No, I'm definitely noticing that like brands that we work with have adopted that. I think a lot of brands initially, whilst like influencer marketing was kind of getting more established, that they thought the goal was kind of more was better for reach. And I think actually a lot of brands as well are a lot more mindful, especially fashion brands, about sustainability and kind of seeding out a lot of products. And I think it also comes down to the fact that a lot of the brand's audiences don't resonate with seeing loads of different faces. They want to see familiar faces so they can put the association with the brand and it feels really authentic. But I think ultimately the smaller creator doesn't necessarily mean sometimes that you're not going to get the reach that you want. If they have a really engaged audience, ultimately you might get more reach because people are more engaged with that content. So yeah, definitely seeing that overall.
Nice. And do you think this kind of signals the shift towards more longer term, more ambassador style partnerships rather than like one-off firework collaborations?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important though. I do think there's always been um, a place for long-term relationships. I think a lot of brands initially they didn't want to tie into people just in case like anything happened with the talent and maybe could get burnt. But actually, I think a lot of brands they are wanting that longer-term relationship so that the brand builds that really nice rapport and it feels like I say authentic. But I do think it is important to have newness where possible as well, just to tap into new audiences. But I think it's kind of about balancing it out and kind of having it upweighted so that you'll still continue in that relationship with long-term partners, but then also looking at new people, but just making sure that they really fit the brand criteria. But you have to trial to learn. And I think that's the most important part about it all, is you can't just do one-off campaigns and hope for the best. I think sometimes you need to do a couple just to kind of test the waters and see how their audience resonates with the brand.
Yeah, I like that perspective of kind of balancing it. And I think it reflects kind of a wider move we're seeing. Like, okay, doing ambassador, long-term relationship building with creators, but still doing one-offs here and there to kind of test and trial, like you said. So yeah, good balance. So next question. We also saw in the study that Instagram remains the top platform at 93%, but TikTok has jumped kind of massively on that ranking, up from 64% to 79% this year. And so it's clear kind of like that TikTok has become a serious channel for brand investment. What do you think is driving that growth, and how do you see brands balancing their presence across these platforms next year?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Instagram is still top. I think ultimately it's more established, it's been around for longer, so brands they've already kind of trialed it, they know what works, and also it's like so commercial for brands, like it's so shoppable as an experience. TikTok's obviously very new, so with that, I think brands have been kind of holding back and just testing the waters, letting other brands that are a bit more brave try it first and kind of have those case studies before they invest in it. Ultimately, each time there's a different social media platform, it's more resource for brands. There's a different strategy for every social media channel. So I guess to know to invest in it, they need to see kind of case studies and prove that it's actually going to work. But I do think TikTok came at a really good time, and I kind of see Instagram as almost this catalog for clients, and then I see TikTok as being like the chance to kind of use it for more EGC purposes and kind of build that relationship between brand and customer, and them getting to see kind of the behind the scenes and a bit more raw, which I think is really nice. But I definitely think TikTok will continue to grow, and there's obviously a lot more features on TikTok that's coming with it, so it's making it more shoppable. But yeah, ultimately I think Instagram is that commercial player for them, and where TikTok has a lot of viability and content can go viral and that can help sales, it's really hard to attribute that versus using links on UTM links or discount codes on Instagram. It's just so much easier.
Yeah, right. So I like that point, kind of making sure that attribution is clearly stated and measurable, right? And I think it's less about the trends, but more about kind of the dependable performance and the creator depth, whether that's on Instagram or TikTok, right? So yeah, I love that point. And we actually also found that content co-creation kind of has taken over sponsored posts as the most used format. Why do you think co-creation resonates more with audiences and brands right now? And second part of the question, what and does that kind of require a different kind of collaboration mindset from both sides, the agency and the creator? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to that creators know what works really well with their audience, and it makes and it's really nice for them to kind of work with a brand collaboratively and make something that feels authentic to their channels, but then also something that's going to perform really well for the brand. I think we will continue to see this because it does perform really well. And a lot of campaigns that I'm working on at the moment for brand, like my clients, is co-creation, which is really nice. I also think as well, it comes down to it's actually a bit more efficient for brands to do co-creation with talent versus doing like a campaign shoot. Like you think how much resource that takes. So yeah, I think it will continue to grow, and it's like I say, it's just that creators create content that resonates well with the audience and they know their audience best. I always think it's important to kind of once you're doing kind of the selective process for the talent, just make sure that you're finding someone that creates content that you like as a brand, but also letting them take creative lead. I think it takes a lot of trust for brands to kind of let them take the reins, but ultimately that's what's going to perform best. I think that's something that I've always kind of pushed on kind of clients across the board, is when you're sending a creative brief to a creator, give them inspiration, but ultimately tell them that it sits with them. And I think you've just got to let them, they know it best.
Yeah, totally. That makes total sense. And I feel like, especially kind of even day to day, kind of on social and beyond, like I feel like the best performing work I see is usually where the creator's voice is like front and center rather than kind of them reading a script. That takes away kind of their creativity and their voice as well during the process, which isn't a good idea. But yeah, thank you for that. Looking more on the number side now, looking at budgets, we saw that the median annual spend now sits between 100K and 150K, with 72% of brands planning to increase budgets again in 2026. And that's a big jump from last year. It was a 54% jump. So yeah, I kind of just want to get your take on what's behind that confidence in your view. Are brands finally seeing stronger ROI, or are they simply reallocating budgets from other channels into influencer activity? And I guess for even for smaller or mid-market brands spending under 100K, what's kind of your advice for making that investment work harder without stretching it too thin?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's really interesting to hear that budgets are going to be going up, and I think we're probably going to continue to see that. And I think it comes down to, again, similar to like TikTok being more established and people wanting to invest more in that. I guess that's also like influencer marketing. It's been around a long time, but now there's more tools and metrics that we can use to support that sign off. I think it's for anyone working in influencer marketing, you'll know that how hard it is sometimes to get sign off from kind of above on getting more budget for influence marketing, when sometimes it's hard to attribute. But now we've got kind of metrics to support why it's working really well, and it can support so many different elements. I think that's one good thing now about influence marketing, is there's kind of, it's not just being used on their channels, like you say, there's co-creation. So it's almost taking away campaign budget for kind of these bigger shoots that you used to do for autumn, winter, or spring, summer. And then it's also, it could be supported, used for like Facebook ads. So it can be used for so many different things. So I guess it could be a case of reallocation. But also I think now brands have enough of a case study to put more budget towards it and to test and learn. And so it's kind of a combination of the two. In terms of stretching budget that's quite small, I would just say I would recommend kind of mapping out campaigns across the year, but also keeping a bit by just to be reactive as well. Like there's so many moments that you can tap into, like culturally across the year, that you could support in, that could make like bigger reach. I think, just being kind of having tactics with it, highlighting key campaigns to align with kind of whatever product focus is that you want, and just really thinking about what that campaign looks like. And don't think, sometimes you don't need to think so far out the box. Sometimes the simplest things work best. And I do think as well within that, like UGC, you always need a pot of money for that, because that is just a massive player, and a big win for brands as well.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's aligns with kind of what we've been seeing throughout the year as well through our different research and studies. It's like brands are finally kind of treating influencer marketing more like a core performance channel, right? Than kind of a nice to have, which is nice to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, and going back to the data, something that really stood out on our side was obviously the compliance and ethics part, and it's now kind of a top selection criteria when choosing creators. From the study, 69% of marketers prioritize ad compliance, and 61% look at brand values and disclosure as well. So, question for you: do you think that's driven mainly by tightening regulation, or is it part of a broader cultural shift in how brands approach influencer marketing?
I think it's probably a combination, but I think the thing that stands out for me is it's that the talent takes accountability, and I think that's so important, and it just shows how much that they appreciate their audience and they want to be honest. And I think if people aren't disclosing that it's an ad or anything, it can be quite deceitful. And I think if a brand's looking at someone's page and it's quite clearly that they've been gifted, or quite clearly an ad, and they've not disclosed that, I think it can just make you shy away from it, because you think, well, why have you done that favor for brand, and why are you not being honest with your audience? And it can be quite frustrating, even as a consumer and somebody that's outside of influence marketing, when you see something a million times that an influencer's posted and they've not disclosed. It makes you question why they aren't disclosing that they've had that gifted, or they get paid for it. But I think it is a combination as well. I ultimately, we were talking about this before this week started. Obviously the brand is just as liable as the talent, so it's going to be a big red flag if an influencer doesn't disclose or apply with the compliance.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it lies on both, right? Accountability. You can't blame one or the other. It's a team effort at the end of the day. And yeah, another part of compliance and ethics that we found was 25% of marketers say that they value creators who actively take a stand against bullying and discrimination. Do you think we'll see kind of more brands collaborating with creators who have stronger kind of social or ethical viewpoints?
I think brands shouldn't shy away from it if
Mm,
it's something that they believe in or stand for. I think it's really, I think quite a lot of people don't resonate with brands that just stay quiet
yeah.
sometimes in certain scenarios. I think it can be difficult, and you just have to, as a brand, really evaluate what your goals are and what you stand for. And if there is somebody that has a voice that's speaking out that resonates with that, then yeah, I don't think there is any harm in working with them. I think it's so important to have a voice on socials, especially if you've got a really large reach and it's something that's really important.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that as well on our side where it's like more brands are kind of leaning into creators who kind of champion positive behavior online. And yeah, we're hearing from teams here and there who want partners that, feel safe, credible, and obviously aligned to their worldview as well, not just
Yeah.
creators who can, like you said, deliver reach and full
Mm,
stop. It's kind of needs to be some synergy between the mindsets, right?
definitely.
Yeah, next question. Back to ROI, good old ROI and measurement. So, measuring ROI remains the top challenge, though the data shows it is easing, down from 50% of marketers last year to 37% now. In On your kind of point of view, what's helping brands get better at measuring performance? Is it improved tech? Is it clearer success metrics or strategies? What's your take on that?
Definitely having a platform supports, like, so tech definitely supports I guess ROI for brands. I think also it's each brand's different. Not every brand will have the kind of tools to basically support ROI, but if that's the case, then there is stuff that they can do manually to track and set goals and see if they've achieved something within a campaign. But yeah, I definitely think it's improved tech overall. I would be I've always suggested and recommend that to brands, clients, or wherever I've worked, that we have like a tracking platform that can support some sort of statistics.
Mm.
But then alongside that, I think obviously things like affiliate platforms really help as well in terms of like things like LTK. That's really good for brands to kind of measure success from a commercial perspective as well. But yeah, I think there's loads of platforms like that are growing as well, which really support brands get that ROI sign off.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that as well. And it feels like, I guess, the combination of, better tech, clearer expectations, it's
Mm,
the gap is closing, right? On that,
yeah.
I feel like. So yeah, better measurement and attribution moving forward for sure. And finally, this is my last question for you before we go to the Q&As. If you had to give one piece of advice to UK brands trying to future-proof their influencer strategy, what would it be?
I feel like I've got a few, but I
Mhm.
feel like the main one is just don't be afraid to test and like try. Try some. Don't be afraid to try something new or work with someone new. I think it's important to kind of always have your finger on the pulse and just try and be reactive where possible. And yeah, just make sure you can plan out as much as you can in advance, but then also don't be afraid to be reactive. Um, yeah, so I guess those are probably a few. And yeah, don't always think about one big campaign. I feel like some brands make that really rookie area where they put a lot of budget behind one large campaign just for the year instead of actually thinking about, or just have always on activity. That's
Yeah,
so
right.
important. You can't just go quiet and then do something big.
Yeah,
It might not perform. You need to always have always on activity where possible.
yeah. I would agree with that. Like keeping that, striking that balance, I feel like it's super important, isn't it?
Definitely.
Well, cool. That was it for my questions. I'm just looking at the Q&A part here. And we do have a few questions, if you don't mind answering them, Laura. We have one here that says a lot of brands work with smaller budgets, so under 100K a year. What would you say are the smartest ways for those brands to kind of stay competitive and still build meaningful creator partnerships?
It's a good question. I think sometimes necessarily having big budgets can be a bit scarier actually, because although sometimes it's nice to have a big pot of money to play with, I think you can be a lot more selective and curated and
Yeah.
kind of a bit more strategic with a smaller budget.
Mhm.
So going back to my point about having always on activity, I would map out your key campaigns and then just really evaluate what each campaign you want to achieve, whether
Mm.
that is reach, engagement, is there an opportunity for co-creation? But I would just really plan in advance with a smaller budget. And I guess it's hard when you're competing with smaller fees. Just make sure that where you can, you're nurturing relationships with talent and agents and building up that rapport.
Yeah.
Transparency is key. If you have a small budget, be honest. And it just comes down to negotiations and saying there's scope for more campaigns. Longer term relationships really support with smaller budgets as well, because you can kind of map them out for multiple campaigns and try and kind of maybe reduce that amount, and at least they're guaranteed work throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the most successful smaller brands are those who actually treat like influencer marketing like relationship building and not media buying or
Yeah.
ads, right? I think with limited spend, like focusing on like fewer, deeper collaborations, who genuinely align with your values and community is even more important, I think, when budgets are lower. But yeah, thanks for that. We have another one here. And it says the price of influencers seem to have risen dramatically, 60% plus in the last 18 months. Do you know why and if it will continue? Have you
Yeah.
seen that in your day to day?
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen the increase of influencer prices. I think
Yeah.
that also comes down to demand. I think,
Yes, I
and
agree.
that's where you're seeing the increase come from. Um, so yeah, I've definitely seen that. And I think like I say, it is just demand, and that's why an influence marketing is
Agree.
growing. And yeah, it is. It's hard for some brands that have got smaller budgets, but I think also when you've got a product that you're really confident in, and it's a really great product, that can also kind of help and just package up to make it work with other offerings, whether that's like more product to go along with payment that will help.
Yeah.
It goes a long way.
Yeah, I think to add to your point, that was mine as well. I kind of just went to demand. I feel like the demand has now outpaced the supply in a sense. Kind of
Yeah.
more brands are running like always on creator campaigns, and micro creators are now the default choice that
Yeah.
we've seen in the UK for performance. So with the demand spiking, I think creators can command the higher fees, right?
Yeah.
Especially those who consistently show performance and convert. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is in our last market study, not this one, but the last one. An interesting finding was that creators have now become more professional, right? I think many now have agents, managers, and full workflows. So I
Mm.
think like the rates can also reflect that production value, that planning, the usage rights, and kind of time spending on like content reviews and this and that. So I think that the payment is for more than just the post now. You're paying for kind of a production, like a mini production studio, basically. So yeah, I think we've seen that too on our
Yeah,
side.
absolutely.
Another question here is you mentioned short form video earlier. With so much content saturation on TikTok and Reels, how can brands make sure that their creator campaigns actually stand out and drive measurable impact rather than just views?
It's a good question. I
Mm,
think it just comes down to the creative and what the like creator comes up with like concept wise. And I think we know that short videos work really well. It's because we as consumers, I think it's below a second, isn't it, in terms of our attention span when we see like a reel on Instagram. Like
yeah.
we see the first snippet and that's it. We don't engage with anything too long.
Mm,
But I think it's just making sure in those first snippets, it's what you want to get across.
yeah.
And yeah, I guess captions can also support as well, getting across what you need. Just make sure that they're not too long, because ultimately people will scroll past. But I guess as well, it's making sure that where possible, something I always encourage is having kind of cross-channel collaborations.
Yes.
So when you're booking in someone for content, don't just do it on kind of one social platform, do it across multiple, so that it's being seen more than once by different audiences. I think that's really important, and that's a good way to get noticed as well.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I think seeing what's happened to content throughout the year, especially this year, I feel like short form doesn't live in isolation anymore, right? It's like when brands repurpose high performing creator content across like ads or newsletters or owned social channels, ROI can kind of jump dramatically, right? It's not about kind of creating once, but kind of like distributing smartly, I think now, which is very interesting. And I have another question here. I think this one's for me. This is all, someone says, this is all very interesting, but can I ask why Ireland isn't included in the study? We have a large number of influencers across many niches that have incredible engagement. That is one I will take to the team. So thank you, Jacqueline, for that one. I can be in touch with you after with a little update, but I'll definitely put that forward to the team. Amazing. I think that's all of our questions for today. And yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of our session here. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining, and everyone else who joined us today. It was a very insightful discussion, a lot to unpack and absorb. If you'd like to dive deeper into the data we've covered here today, our market study is now officially live. It launched this morning, and you can download it right now through this QR code and explore all of the UK specific insights, the trends, and the benchmarks we mentioned. I'll also drop the link in a follow-up email so you won't miss that as well, along with the replay to this webinar, so you can share it around to your teams. And yeah, so they can also grab the insights too. Yeah, that brings us to the end. Thanks again for joining us and for the great questions. A special thanks to Laura again for your expertise. And yeah, everyone, have a great rest of the day, and we'll hopefully see you in the next webinar.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.